The world knows threats and heroes alike, and the Ruby Sands has its share of troubles. The appearance of the red glass gate did not bring chaos all at once. At first, the scholars of the Ruby Sands approached the phenomenon as they had approached every mystery before it, with study, patience, and debate. Wizards from Landmore College and the Chamber of Worries gathered at the crater where the strange crimson structure shimmered in the desert sun. They built research outposts around the impact site and recorded every flicker of light, every vibration in the crystal surface. But the gate was not content to remain a curiosity. The first creatures to emerge were small things, strange animals with unfamiliar shapes, crawling from the shimmering threshold as if they had simply wandered through a doorway. Some were harmless, others dangerously aggressive. Scholars attempted to capture and catalog them, believing they were simply wildlife from some distant world. Then came the larger beasts. Great hulking forms crossed the boundary, creatures whose bodies were armored in bone or chitin. Some carried strange energies within them that warped the air around their bodies. The Ruby Sands had known monsters before. Every land does. But these things carried a wrongness about them, as though the laws of nature struggled to decide how they should exist. Cities across the desert began to feel the strain. Caravans traveling near the crater vanished. Entire research camps were destroyed overnight. Scouts reported sightings of unnatural creatures wandering the dunes far beyond the gate itself. Fear spread through the settlements of the Ruby Sands, and the scholars who had once argued eagerly over magical theory now faced a far more urgent question. Had their curiosity unleashed something that could not be controlled? As the threat grew, alliances formed that had never existed before. Wizards who had once competed for prestige began sharing knowledge. Scholars from distant lands arrived to assist. But the Ruby Sands did not rely on magic alone. Ancient powers also stepped forward to defend the world they shared. Giants marched from the mountains. Dragons descended from their high eyries. These ancient beings, older than the first desert cities themselves, understood the danger of the gate more clearly than most humans. They knew that such portals could not remain open without consequences. If the flow of creatures from beyond continued unchecked, the world itself could be overwhelmed. The battles that followed were unlike anything the desert had seen. Warriors fought creatures that did not bleed as earthly animals did. Wizards hurled spells powerful enough to scorch the dunes into glass. Dragons battled towering beasts whose roars could shatter stone. Entire regions of desert became war zones, where strange energies twisted the landscape into something barely recognizable. From this chaos emerged a generation of legendary heroes. Some were warriors who fought with blade and courage. Others were mages whose mastery of spellcraft surpassed anything seen before. There were giants whose strength turned the tide of entire battles, and dragons whose firestorms wiped out monstrous armies. Among these champions were figures whose names would echo through the centuries. Beings like Ariek the giant and Tiv-Voch the dragon, whose deeds helped prevent the gate's horrors from spreading across the world. Yet even heroes could not simply destroy the gate. The structure seemed bound to the fabric of reality itself. Attempts to shatter it with brute force failed. Magic hurled against its surface only caused the crimson glass to ripple like water before returning to its original form. Scholars realized that the gate had not merely appeared. It had been anchored into existence by the strange celestial energy that had created it. Closing it would require knowledge as well as courage. And so, the greatest minds of the Age of Wizards began the most ambitious collaboration in history. Magical schools that had once guarded their secrets now shared their discoveries openly. For decades, they experimented with spells, artifacts, and rituals designed to weaken the gate's connection to the other world. At the same time, warriors continued fighting the creatures that emerged from the portal. Generations lived and died in that struggle. Children grew up hearing stories of battles fought near the Crimson Crater. Entire cities contributed soldiers and scholars to the effort. The war against the gate was not a single conflict, but a long, grinding age of vigilance. Finally, after years of preparation, a plan was formed. The greatest mages and heroes gathered near the gate, combining their power in a ritual unlike anything attempted before. Spells layered upon spells, ancient runes etched into the desert floor, and artifacts forged through decades of research were brought together in one desperate attempt. When the ritual began, the desert itself seemed to tremble. Light burst from the gate as if something on the other side resisted the effort to close it. The sky darkened. Winds howled across the dunes with the force of a storm, but the combined power of the world's defenders held firm. In a blinding flash of energy, the gate shattered. The crimson structure fractured into countless shards of magical crystal, scattering across the desert crater where it had once stood. The connection between worlds was severed, and the monstrous tide that had threatened the Ruby Sands finally ended. The victory saved the world, but it also changed it forever. The alliances that had formed during the war began to fracture once the immediate threat was gone. Wizards who had once shared their secrets freely began to guard them again. Suspicion grew between magical institutions that feared their rivals might now hold too much power. The war had proven that cooperation could save the world. But it had also shown just how dangerous magic could become when placed in the wrong hands. By the end of this 1,000-year chapter, the scholars of the Union of Ash recorded a turning point in history. The gate had been destroyed, and the monsters had been defeated. Yet the unity that made that victory possible was already beginning to crumble. The Age of Wizards had saved the world. Now the world would discover what happens when powerful people begin to distrust one another.